been 5 years of pauses and promises and legislation and lawsuits. And now the federal government changing course on student loans.
Millions of borrowers could soon face some serious consequences if they don't start paying up.
The federal government has a lot of different tools they can use to collect on these federal student loans. And today they say they're going to start using those tools.
Nothing says I'm an adult quite like making that very first student loan payment.
Today, Junior?
It's a bittersweet rite of passage that greets millions of college graduates every year. Welcome to the real world. Now start paying off your degree. Let's rewind a little back to March 2020. The world was turned upside down by the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses closed, schools were shut down, and people just stayed home. Jobs were lost, their hours were cut, and financial uncertainty was the norm for households all across the country. At that point in time, President Trump was in his very first term. Amongst all the chaos and epidemic disruption, his administration took several emergency steps to try to stabilize the economy. One of those steps was to pause federal student loan payments. Not only were payments suspended, but interest was frozen at 0%. And collections on default loans were also put on hold. This was designed to only be a temporary relief measure, a way to help Americans survive the economic shock of the pandemic without having to worry about their monthly bills. But temporary wasn't really that temporary after all, at least until now. The pause, which began in March of 2020, lasted far beyond Trump's first term, and even beyond the peak of the pandemic itself. By the time President Biden took office in early 2021, the student loan freeze was still in place. Biden took a whole different approach to the issue, however. Rather than just pausing the loans, he tried to eliminate them altogether. At least that was the case for many borrowers.
Biden administration is canceling federal student loans for 55,000 workers.
His administration proposed a sweeping forgiveness plan that would cancel up to $20,000 in federal student loans per borrower. The move was praised by progressives, but was met with very sharp criticism from conservatives, who argued that it was both unfair and legally questionable.
Millions of student loan borrowers are in limbo this morning after two judges blocked parts of President Biden's loan forgiveness plan this week. I mean, the Biden administration cannot reduce borrowers' monthly bills.
In 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Biden's loan forgiveness plan, ruling that such a sweeping cancellation of that much debt required congressional approval.
Your suit argues that the Biden administration is exceeding its authority. He's overstepped with this student loan forgiveness plan.
That the statute, the Higher Education Act of 1965 and its amendments don't give the president the authority to do this, or his Department of Education, that only Congress really has the power to decide.
The court essentially said, nice idea, but not your call. But the Biden administration didn't stop there. In the aftermath of the court's decision, they just came up with a new plan. They launched what they called the SAVE plan. This was short for Saving on a Valuable Education. It was a reworked, income-driven payment plan to reduce monthly payments based on income and family size, and even offered quicker forgiveness for smaller balances. The administration also began canceling student debt, but this was just for targeted groups like public servants. So by 2025, then the numbers were kind of staggering. Overall, $1.7 trillion in federal student loan debt has piled up. Ouch, y'all. So for nearly 5 years, many borrowers paid little to next to nothing, if anything at all, and the system was just completely under pressure. Critics warn that unless something were to change, that financial burden would shift even heavier onto taxpayers, the people who never took loans out in the first place.
Debt cannot be wiped away. It just ends up getting transferred to others. So why should Americans who didn't go to college or went to college and responsibly paid back their loans pay for the student loans of other Americans?
But here we are, 2025, and Trump's president again. Back in office, Trump has made it very clear that this pause is over, and it's time to repay what's owed. His administration is undoing many of Biden's forgiveness measures and taking a much harder stance on repayment. The Department of Education is tightening enforcement and reintroducing stronger collection efforts for borrowers who have defaulted or just simply failed to resume payments.
No student loan has been referred to collection since March of 2020. That comes to an end.
Trump's view, like many other Americans, is pretty straightforward. If you borrowed the money, it's your responsibility to pay it back. And if you're not paying, the burden doesn't just go away. Instead, it was just falling on the shoulder of the taxpayers like you and me. And honestly, that's not fair, especially for those Americans who never went to college, or those who did go to college and already paid their loans off the hard way. Come on, think about it. If I took out a mortgage to buy a house, should my neighbor have to pay for it for me? Of course not. Guys, that's my debt. I'm the one that signed the agreement. I'm the one that made the decision. So why should someone else be forced to cover it? That's the central argument behind the Trump administration's push. It's simply personal responsibility. Hurts sometimes, doesn't it?
But fewer than 4 out of 10 borrowers are in repayment. This is unsustainable, unfair, and a huge liability for American taxpayers.
They believe that forgiveness should be reserved for rare instances, truly exceptional circumstances, not handed out like a participation trophy. And while that position has sparked plenty of anger from borrowers, those who hoped that that debt would just be completely, written off and they would owe nothing, but still, this is far from the end of the conversation. Student loan debt isn't just a financial issue for the borrower, the person who took out the loan. What about all the generations after they're gone? Many borrowers remain in limbo, juggling inflation, stagnant wages, and high interest rates, all while trying to build a life under the weight of a massive student loan debt. But for now, the message from the White House is clear. The grace period is over. Student loans are due, and if you've signed up for that debt, it's time to take responsibility and pay it back. Because at the end of the day, being an adult isn't just about having a degree. It's about owning your choices and, believe it or not, repaying your debts. We all do it. Is it fun? No. But guys, that's just life. And one of the first lessons in life, well, that life is hard. And debt, it has to be repaid by the borrower, not the taxpayers who didn't take the loans out in the first place. If you guys liked what you saw and you want to keep up with more news, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit like if you like this video. We'll see you next time.